Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Giant Zone. You've got your hosts, GM George, Steve the Banker, and yours truly, Carl Fly Guy. We get together here every week, guys, to talk about our Giants. And in doing so, we always invite one of our followers to come join us on the show, get involved in the discussion, and ask any questions that they may have and join the discussion. This week, we got a good friend and a good follower on the show. Let me introduce everybody to Tommy G. Tommy, say hello, buddy.
How are you guys? Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it. Big fan of every single one of you. Super pumped to talk about some Giants football.
Excellent. And a lot of you will know that Tommy does a lot of draft previews. He does a lot of in-depth work. He does some good work. And he's got a lot of great interaction that I've seen with followers as well. So we're really excited to have you here, Tommy. Let's kind of get into this, Tommy. Before we get into your questions, why don't you just give us a little background about yourself, how you became a Giant fan, and any Giants related or game day traditions that you and your family may have.
Sure. So born and raised in Brooklyn, New York City. Been a Giants fan for as long as I can remember. I have a funny story how I became a Giants fan. So my mother always had a family friend that would come over. I was about 8 or 9 years old. Really wanted to get me into sports, really wanted to get me into football. He was a big Jets fan. So every Sunday he would come over, put the Jets game on. I would run around, pay no attention, not want to be bothered at all with it. Until one week it was Jets versus Giants. So, and I remember that day specifically just sitting there the whole time mesmerized by that royal blue and the Giants logo on the helmet. And literally, fellas, ever since that day, I've been locked in as a Giants fan. And to this day, he's still a little mad at me because he's a diehard Jets fan. But yeah, that's how I started as a Giants fan. Blessed to witness 2 of the 4 Super Bowl victories. Not as blessed to witness one of the losses in 2000. And you, Janky, a Knicks fan too. I'll throw that in there as a little tidbit, but nothing comes ahead of the Giants.
You're really not allowed to talk about losses on this show, Tommy, but we'll
no more. I missed that rule.
Yeah. So let's kind of get you going here, Tommy. So we know you got some questions. So why don't you ask us your first question? We'll just get going on this.
Sure. So I figure we kick it off with the obvious, right? What's next? The Super Bowl is behind us. We have our GM. We have our coaching staff in place. Senior Bowl's behind us. This is kind of like the little bit of a dead period. We know the franchise tag started today. We're not players in that. We have the combine on March 1st. So I just wanted to ask you fellas, like, what's next in your mind? What's the next key step in this process?
Well, I kind of got the NFL schedule here as far as dates and important upcoming dates. And if you guys want to just go through that so we can kind of just review what's coming up in the offseason, we can kind of tackle that quickly. And then George, you and Steve, feel free to jump in with any information you guys have as well, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So as Tommy mentioned, we got the combine going March 1st through the 7th. And then March 8th, prior to 4:00, is when the clubs can start designating players with the franchise tag. So right after the combine, you got that. Then March 14th through the 16th is when the clubs start, they're permitted to start engaging negotiations with free agents and players that can become unrestricted free agents. So March is going to be a pretty busy month here. March 16th, free agency starts. Again, we've talked about that on some previous shows. I don't think we're going to be big players here in free agency. My opinion is more depth signings. But, hey, that could change. Then, March 16th, also trading period starts. I still think that there may be something coming down with a trade. And, I don't want to see it happen. My gut tells me that Saquon may be up for a trade. And I know some people disagree because his value may be low. I just don't know where they stand on him, what their feelings are about him, if they feel that he fits their system. What do you guys think?
Well, Steve, I'll start. I'll start. And like you said, the only thing I would include in that is basically the entire month of March, you have pro days. They're going to go to different colleges. And I know that a lot of times the pro days, because they're playing on their home college field, a lot of the numbers are tweaked. All of a sudden, a 4.7 40 guy turns into a 4.4 40 guy. I know those kinds of things happen, and that just comes with the territory. But I really think that when a scout goes to these pro days, they're looking. They've already passed the 40 time. That's done and over with. I don't care what your 40 time is. I want to see what you do, on the field as far as, one-on-ones, corner versus wide receiver. Where's a quarterback going to throw the ball? Those three things. I think pro days are pretty important, mainly because I think that just the combine is just one of those, shorts and t-shirts type deals. And I think they really want to see these guys in action. I think they really want to see these guys being competitive. I think as far as, when did we say tag time was?
Franchise tag.
Yeah.
8th. Starts on the 8th.
Exactly. I don't think we're tagging anybody. I don't think anyone is getting tagged. I think we're going to let them all. I think that because of our cap situation and because, let's face it, guys, this team, this new regime, they know the value of these players that are coming up. And I think they're going to sit there and say, hey, you take this or you go test the market, because most likely that player is going to come back with a nothing and they're going to have to take even less. I think they're going to let these guys go test the market. And, if they're gone, they're gone. We're trying to rebuild anyway. If they come back at our price. I don't see anybody getting tagged. And the final thing I'll mention, and then I'll hand it over to you, Steve. And I know I'm going into different areas here, but I really went back and listened to Shane. I listened to Dable, and I listened to Kafka because I wanted to know. I know Twitterville, we are all about trading, and I know we're all about letting somebody go, especially Barkley, which I'm a little bit confused about, but it is what it is. I realize the injury history. I think they believe that their core 3 skill positions, or players, I should say, is going to be Daniel Jones, Kenny Golladay, and Saquon Barkley. And they are going to build around those players. I think you could see Rudolph, Ingram gone, and nobody will have hurt feelings about it. I think you could see Slayton get traded. I think you could see Shepard gone. And I think this team has decided, okay, we're going to choose 3 players in the skill positions. Who are they? Jones, Barkley, Golladay. We're going to build around those guys. Okay. We're going to let Golladay play out his contract and then move on from him. And we're going to do everything we can, unless he absolutely turns out to not deserve it. They want to make Daniel Jones into a franchise quarterback. I listened to these interviews, man. I went back in there with no bias, and that's the way I truly feel. So that's what I see coming down the pipe. No tags, 3 core players, do everything else in the draft. Pro days is going to be really important. Steve, I'll hand it to you now, buddy.
Thanks, George. So Tommy, again, great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us. Your question was, what's next? Important league dates. So Carl, I actually printed off the same schedule. So you have that up. And for those listening,
I had them in my notes.
Yeah, no worries. For everybody listening, it's operations.nfl.com. It's a tremendous resource. It lays it all out there. And I learned a lot. Like I thought I knew, like you go on there and it's fascinating. There's like all these nuances about, well, if you have a new head coach, but he's a righty versus a lefty, like it's, I'm making a joke of it, but you understand, like there's a lot of nuance to the NFL calendar in the offseason. It's pretty cool. To answer your question, I would divide my thoughts into 3 things. One, Carl touched upon it. March 16th begins the trading period for 2022 at 4 o'clock. the month of March going into April, usually it's all about, like George said, right? Pro days, combine, getting ready to like who we're going to draft. Every team's different. Some teams are pretty busy during March, but not, with the franchise tag. I think we can all agree there's no franchise tag worthy players. I think March, Tommy's going to be fascinating for one other reason that the NFL calendar doesn't talk about, and we haven't talked about yet here. We mentioned it, if you remember on previous podcasts, very briefly. There's two players. I know James Bradbury's one, and I want to say Blake is the other. I can't remember. I know it's terrible. I didn't bring that with me today. Who's have guaranteed money in their contract if they're still with us as of, and each one has a different date in March. One was like March 16th, which is no coincidence. And the other one was a different date in March. I forget why. So my first comment is, I think the theme in March is going to be health. What we do or don't do with certain players, like Blake is probably the biggest example. It comes down to health. Do we keep them? Do we restructure them? I don't think any of the four of us know the answers to how healthy some of the guys are right now. And that's, so I think that's going to be key. I think for me personally, guys like Blake, I don't want them to go. I'd like us to see them restructure. We had long conversations last week. We talked about contracts. So number one, Tommy, the month of March is going to be about, are we cutting guys, but also are we restructuring? And I think the overriding theme is health. I think it's easy as fans say, oh, we got to keep Blake. Well, maybe, but what if the guy's, no matter how much we love him and he's willing to restructure, what if he's like 10 months away or something? I mean, we just don't know. Yeah. Guys like Sterling, they're going to be gone. Evan Ingram is not a member of the Giants anymore. He's actually a free agent, right? So he's gone. His time is up here. Kyle Rudolph needs to be cut. $5 million in cap savings. So March for the New York Football Giants is going to be incredibly busy, kind of exciting as fans, I think. And I think we're going to start seeing what does Shane really do. The second thing is pro days, like George said. I think pro days are going to be critical this season as much as any for two reasons. One, character. We've talked about this in the past. It's not, listen, the tape don't lie. I think if you're a real football fan, one of our frustrations the last 10 years with the Giants and the way we've drafted is, oh, they look great in shorts, great at the combine. Look at the tape. How did they play? And who did they play against? And what systems did they play? And then how do you project them as players in our system? But the pro days are going to be critical, and the combine, for seeing how hard are they working in the offseason? How hard are these guys working, and what are they going to be like when we bring them in? And I think this draft is so deep that there's so much nuance between a guy in the third round and the guy in the fourth round. Sometimes it's character. It's not what he did. So I think what Shane showed us when he was the assistant GM in Buffalo, Daboll, in his list of here's what I want from players. So number one, health, free agency, who are we getting rid of in March? That's going to be fascinating. I personally think we're going to trade Saquon Carl. We can talk about that. Right. I think the more I think about it, it's actually a no-brainer.
Yeah. So I agree, Steve.
There's a very, 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 very long list of cons to keeping him on the team. Actually, we could talk about it. Right. So those are two of my three. And then the third thing, which I kind of said, was trades. I actually think they're going to try to trade several players, but who knows what the market's going to be. And what would we as fans be happy with? So, Tommy, I think the important dates are March 16th as much as any, but then the combine, like George said, and pro days. But I think it's what you don't see on the calendar for a couple of guys. Guaranteed money in their contracts is not an NFL calendar thing. It's what does their contract say, and if there's guaranteed money in the contract, they don't want to keep them if they plan on trading them. So are they going to try to trade them, or are they going to cut them if they can't trade them? It's going to be fascinating.
Who are we rolling with, and how much is it going to cost us? Right. Tommy, what do you think about Saquon, that whole situation?
Yeah, so well said, Steve and George. I did want to double back to the Saquon question. To me, it's a difficult question, right? You have a player with a ton of talent, player that was drafted highly. A lot of negative reactions still around him from where he was drafted, who he was drafted by. My thing, it breaks down into two pieces. One, trade value, right? So if they offer us a 4th or a 5th round pick for Saquon, is that better? Is that more important? Leaving the coaching staff devoid of one of the prime playmakers that they have? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't think so. Now, when you get to the range of, hey, 2nd round, 3rd round, Buffalo's really interested, I think that's when it really spices up a little bit, right? So, Shane's talked about, I want more at bats in the draft. I want as many selections as possible. And looking at this team for the last 5-6 years, we need to replace a lot of this roster. So I think if you can get a value pick, 2nd round, 3rd round for Saquon, I think you make a move on it, especially with the way the running back position is in the NFL, interchangeable. If you really look at the ball offense, right? So he's a big believer in the 11 personnel, 10 personnel, right? So he uses the running back, but it's not used a lot. It's not a very important factor in the ball's previous offense. I'm sure it'll have different changes when it comes to the Giants. I'm sure it's not going to be a clone, but I'm not trading Saquon unless I get a 3rd minimum. I'm not touching it. I'm not touching it for a 4th or 5th. The other reason being is we don't have a lot of cap room. We do need playmakers. We do need guys that can execute the coach's game plan. And we can't just rely on rookies and retread free agents. So if I get a good pick for Saquon, I'm making a move on it. If I don't, I'm betting on him being healthy. If you look back to last season when he started to get healthy before the Dallas game, the Saints game, basically put the team on his back, had the long receiving touchdown, had the rushing touchdown in overtime to win the game. The kid has talent. But is he injury prone? Absolutely. Is it a risk to keep him? Sure. But I think that all bases in value.
So let's kind of just dive into the semantics of this a little bit. We still have Booker on the roster. Okay. So there's that issue. I don't personally, I don't see Booker being a fit in the type of system that we saw them run in Buffalo. All right. Now, I do see a player. I see Saquon coming out of college, okay, fitting in their system. I don't necessarily get the feel, and this is nothing more than a gut feeling, that Saquon now, losing a couple steps, his blocking is not the best either, by the way. I just don't get the impression that he fits into their system. Now, Tommy, to your point, I don't see them getting a 2nd or a 3rd, maybe a 4th, probably at least a 5th. But, would you be surprised on draft night or day 2 of the draft that if he's traded for picks? Would anybody really here be surprised if he is?
I'm not saying I would be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised because weirder things have happened. But I think we're missing something here. And I think the thing that we're missing is we're missing who our offensive coordinator is. And I think we're missing what they did in KC with their running backs. And I think that that's a key to Saquon Barkley, because Saquon Barkley is very good out of the backfield catching passes. And we have Kenny Galladay, who is very good at blocking downfield as a receiver. They are going to implement all those things into the offense. It's not just going to be a day ball offense. Go back and watch KC and what they did with their running backs, and think about how they would utilize that with Saquon Barkley plus Kadarius Toney, because they're going to use Kadarius Toney as that secret weapon as well. I'm not supposed to say the name of who he would be like from KC because apparently people jump on you for saying it. So I'm not going to say the name, I promise. But look at how they utilize those players in KC and how that would work to Saquon's strength. I think it's just like if we were to start talking about the defense, everything is going to be different, whether you're talking about offense or defense. They're going to implement these guys in different ways. I guarantee you one thing, that Saquon is not going to be asked as much. He may start in the beginning, but he's not going to be asked he's not going to be the run up the middle running back. That's not who he is. And I think that this new regime understands that and is going to utilize him in a different way. Now, you talk about Booker. I wouldn't be surprised if I see Booker moved in some sort of way and us drafting a running back. Yeah. I think somebody said that and yes, it's not much of a cap savings, but I think someone said if he gets cut June 1st, it's like a savings of 2.5 or something like that. I mean, it's small, but it's still a savings one way or the other.
Right.
Is the way you got to look at it. And I think, and when you said that, you're right, because again, like I said, I listened to those interviews, and you're right. He said it several times as if to tell people, hey, my phone is on, give me a call. He wants more at bats during the draft. I understand all of that, but I think he wants more at bats in an aspect where he can keep those core players and still get some draft picks. So down the line, because again, I mean, Bobby told us this is a very deep offensive line draft class. This is a very deep defensive lineman draft class. We get those picks on down the line. We can sit there and get your top 4, top 5, whether it's one offensive lineman, one defensive back, or because I also believe that we are going to take a cornerback very early because I just have that feeling from Martindale. I think he wants a cornerback, somebody with not only speed, but somebody who can get into that backfield because he loves those corner blitzes. Somebody can get into the backfield and get to that quarterback and take him down. I think we're gonna take the superstar offensive lineman, the superstar defensive linebacker or edge rusher, whichever route you want to go. One defensive back, and I think on down the line is when we're going to start picking up our offensive linemen. If you notice, back in January, everybody was screaming about take 5 offensive linemen in the first 2 rounds. That's kind of dwindled off. And I think we're seeing now that we need to bring in some serious playmakers no matter what position you're talking about.
Food for thought.
Well said.
I think we're going to go into the draft a little bit more into the show here, but just food for thought. Let's say they trade Saquon, all right? They want more at bats during the draft, all right? So let's say they trade Saquon. Maybe they're looking at someone, a running back, later in the draft. And you keep Booker for that change of pace, veteran presence to help with the rookie, bring the rookie along. All right. You get the pick. Again, guys, this is just a gut feeling. I don't think Saquon is for them. I don't know why. It's what I'm feeling here. Are there any running backs that you guys see that they may want to add later in the draft?
In the draft?
Yeah, that kind of fits their
Damian
mold.
Pierce out of Florida. Damian Pierce out of Florida and James Cook out of Georgia.
Love them. Who else did you say out of Georgia, George?
James Cook.
Yeah.
He can catch the ball. I mean, was it a national championship game or was it when they played Michigan? It's been so long now. He had this play out of the backfield where he just completely deceived the entire secondary and was just wide open downfield and got this beautiful pass. And I feel like he's got more power than what but he shared time in the backfield with another running back. So that kind of hindered him on his numbers. So don't focus on his numbers. Look at his play. Get out the tape and look at his play. You're going to love it. Damian Pierce, I fell in love with him at the Senior Bowl. I was watching Senior Bowl practice, and he laid this block on this linebacker, and he just would not. I don't know if he expected Pierce to just kind of give up on it as soon as okay, you made your initial hit, kid. Now let me go. But he was relentless, and that if you want to block and running back, check him out.
That's a good one, George. I have one too. I got Ty Chandler out of North Carolina. Unbelievable running back out of the backfield.
Talking about my team now.
Wheel route extraordinaire, right? Blazing out of the backfield. Phenomenal compliment back if you have another power back. Big fan of Chandler. I love Pierce. I think there's multiple running backs in there that you could look at, especially when you start getting into the 3rd, 4th rounds.
Mm-hmm.
I want a running back that could come out of the backfield and catch. I want a running back that could create mismatches. there's multiple. So that's why I think when you look at Saquon, he's coming back for, I think it's around 7 million, right? About the mid rate, a little to the high rate for running backs in the NFL. But this is my other point with that, and why I'm fairly against trading him is because you're looking at a potential situation where you're replacing 3 or 4/5 of the offensive line. You're looking at a situation where you're potentially replacing both tight ends, right? I can't see Ingram coming back. Not a big fan of Ingram. Great guy, great teammate. Rudolph is going to be a cap casualty. Receivers, who knows, injured. So we're looking at a lot of changing pieces, a lot of rotating pieces. I think a lot of us want to hit the complete reset button, right? Which is fair. After what we seen last year, that was probably, in my over 20 years watching the Giants, the most dreadful, boring, basic offense you could ever imagine, right? We didn't have a single offensive player improve in 2 years other than Andrew Thomas. Andrew Thomas was the single offensive player that improved in 2 years. So,
Right.
if you're looking at saving the 7 mil, I get it. I wouldn't be tremendously opposed to it because as George said, there are a lot of great running backs out there. But be careful. We have a lot of moving pieces. You want to give the new coaching staff their playmakers, right? You want to get them off on the right start. So I would say, honestly, I'd be 50-50 there with Saquon.
Steve, let me ask you a question. We mentioned 3 backs: James Cook, Ty Chandler, and then also Pierce out of Florida. They're all about 5'10", 5'11". Does that size concern you? And what are your thoughts on them?
So let me just weigh in on Saquon because I haven't. Saquon's got to go. The problem as fans that I think too many people have is they fall in love with what a player was and in their mind's eye what they think he should be. You all need to step back and realize the business side of this. Take your emotion out of it. I know as fans, that's by definition not what we do. We are fanatics. Fan is short for fanatics. But my biggest beef, and I think at the end of the day, most fans' biggest beef with this team during the Gettleman era and even before that with Reese, is team construction. No offensive line. By definition, that's team construction. We should have drafted this. We didn't draft this. Guys, that's called team construction. And that is how much money do you devote in the salary cap towards a particular player or a particular unit. We've got like $10 million towards running backs. Now, if we're in contention, so let me take a step back. Let's think about this, guys, for a minute. If we're in contention for the playoffs, if we're in contention to win our division, and if we're in contention to maybe win the championship to try to go to the Super Bowl, it makes sense to have a Saquon Barkley. And you cross your fingers. He's never, ever, ever been healthy. Even his rookie year, he was not healthy in the preseason. Now he had an unbelievable rookie year, an all-time rookie year. And his second year, the guy had the ankle. He was hurt. He still had a phenomenal year, but he's not that same player. Now, to be fair, it takes 2 years, an injury like that. Okay, fine. Like, let's say, here's the problem. Again, going back, team construction. What if he has a great year? I really don't care. What are you going to do? You're going to sign a 26-year-old running back to a big contract? You know what you are at that point? You're the Dallas Cowboys. Mm-hmm. You're the Dallas freaking Cowboys. I don't want to be a team that's saddled with a running back who's close to 30. Let's think about this. We're all smart guys, who's getting close to 30 with a big, fat contract, because that's what you're going to have. So what do? Well, Steven, it sounds like you're just not a happy guy and you're just complaining about, you're sore about Saquon. I'm not. I didn't want him picked at 2, but once I picked him, I fell in love with him. Oh my God. The guy's from New York City, local guy originally. What a story. What a character in terms of the quality of human being he is, representing the team, leader in the locker room, the way he is on the field, his work. I mean, what's not to like? But this isn't about falling in love with a player. This is about what's good for the team going forward. So to finish the thought, Shane was the assistant DM. Bean brought him in. What did they do in Buffalo? They tore that down. That's what this is, guys. This is a rebuild. And we need, I did a poll this past week on Twitter. I don't know if any of you saw it. Shane hits it out of the park in the draft. Think 2007, where most of the rookies contributed. So I'm reading the poll here real quick. This is to finish my thing on Saquon. He reduces the salary cap close to his goal of 40 million. Uses some money to sign depth. Tommy, I agree with you, sign some depth. and proven players on and proven players on a 1 or 2 year quote unquote prove it deal, like we've done, because we don't have the money to spend on big free agents, right?
Right.
Everyone stays healthy. Let's say they do. How many wins would you be happy? 62.5% said just improve, no number. The other options were 8 wins, 9 plus. Oh, it's okay to miss the playoffs, but I want 9 or more wins. And then the last one was I need to be in the playoffs. 4.2% of respondents. So the lowest choice was playoffs. Guys, nobody's planning us to be in the playoffs.
Right.
Do I want that? Of course, I want to win a Super Bowl every year. We all do. You can't have 7.2 million. I mean, think about that. Like say that. Say it. Say 7.2 million. It makes no sense. We have too much. We don't even have enough money to sign our draft picks. Let that sink in. We're 10.3 million over the cap. And even when we get to the cap, which is called cap compliant, we still need like 20 million to sign our draft picks. So the more I think about it, the more I'm reading, we may trade away one of those 2 top picks because we don't have enough money to sign both the 5th and the 7th. That's how bad of a situation DG left us in. So I think I can't remember the last Super Bowl winning team that had a top 10 running back. Most teams, I haven't done my study. I'll go back. I think it would be interesting. I find it interesting. Eddie George, 1st round pick. Kansas City finally picked a running back at the end of the 1st round. Pittsburgh this past year picked a running back in the 1st round. But the reality is most good running backs, Cleveland has 2 running backs from the 1st round. I'm well aware. But most teams, they find running backs in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. All you need to do is look at Giants history, right? Ahmad Bradshaw in the 7th, Dave Meggett. If anybody remembers Dave Meggett. I mean, we can go on and on. There's so many great. So Carl, to answer your question, I think that I haven't gotten my full analysis done on the draft, and I'm starting to dig in, and I was going to talk about that tonight.
Sure.
But I already have seen, if you take the top 10 running backs available, it's not a very sexy group at the top. There's 2 or 3 guys that people are like kind of falling in love with, but they're predicting maybe 1 running back in the 1st round, maybe. So do I want a guy who's 5'10", whatever? I just want productivity. I don't think Daboll is the type of guy, nor Kafka from Kansas City, that are going to be running back focused. And I think they also realize we're not gonna win a Super Bowl next year. We need to show improvement, and we need to rebuild the offensive line. And we've shown that when we had Brandon Jacobs and Ahmad Bradshaw, neither of those guys were a 1,500-yard running back. We did it by committee with 2 guys, and Derek Ward when we had him. So I'm fine with us finding a tight end in the middle rounds, 3rd to 4th, 5th. And I think you can find a running back in the 4th to 5th as well. And I think, we have 2 3rd-round picks. So, yeah.
And Steve, I know you bring up some great points, and I like your thinking. You're looking long-term, and maybe that's what I wasn't saying, but I agree with you. That I think it's part of why, in my vision, I don't see Saquon here. I don't. I've been saying it all along. But look at the Patriots. All the Super Bowls they won, they never had a 1st-round running back pick that led the league in rushing, but they found guys that fit the system. Same thing Sean and Daboll said. We're going to build the system around the talent we have. So it's a fascinating discussion. We could spend hours.
We could spend the entire night on it.
Exactly right. But all good points, guys. So that was a great discussion. Tommy, what else do you have for us? Tommy, did we lose you? All right.
Tommy, you got us?
I think he froze up.
Okay.
Oh.
So, all right. So let's kind of keep going here. Well, that just hit a
Tommy, come back.
That hit a
Tommy.
stop. So, all right. So, given that, let's talk about trading in the draft and whatnot. All right. You Steve, you did say something about we don't have the money to sign the 5th and the 7th round pick, 5th and 7th overall pick. I apologize. Do you obviously we're kind of talking about one of them getting traded. Which one do you think goes? And do you think it's, well, if this guy's here, we're going to use this pick and then trade 7? Or here comes Tommy again. Or do you see something out of the blue? What are your guys' thoughts about that? Steve, why don't you take it away? Why don't you start with that?
Well, Tommy, the Tommy Q here, you're welcome back.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I got there's bad storms here tonight, so I got booted.
Oh.
So I'm going with the backup device.
Well, be safe.
For everybody
Yeah, no, we're
listening,
good.
everybody listening, this is live TV, baby. This is happening.
That's how it
I'm back,
rolls.
though, baby. I'm back.
That's right. So, Tommy, the question that Carl had was, listen, I made a point. We don't have enough money to sign both first-round picks. I want a 5th and a 7th. I want 2 impact players. We have like literally no impact players. We've talked about that during the season. Man, I wish we had impact. What's the difference between all the great players we have, but impact? Michael Strahan, Justin Tuck, guys who like when it's all on the line, 5th and 7th pick is like, man, that's impact player, right? I don't want us to trade, but we don't have enough money to sign both picks right now. Even, I mean, that's how bad it is that we have to dump salary, restructure. Listen, I'm excited. Shane seems like the right guy for that and the people he's bringing in. But Carl's question was, do we trade the 5th or the 7th? I have my philosophy. My philosophy is they have their draft board and you got 4 or 5 or 6 guys that are top 5 players. But what if the guys we want are gone? What if there's 5 and there's no quarterback trades and whatever? All 5 are gone. Hutchinson, Thibodeau. I mean, whoever you think they are, Neil. Well, in that case, I'd want us to trade the 5th. And the good news is if you trade the 5th versus the 7th, you can get, I mean, even more, right? But if we get one of those, whoever the Giants, and I'd like to trust them. Those 5 players are, if we get one of them, and then who drops down to the 7th, and we have to trade the 7th because we have to. My philosophy is I would be fine with us trading the 7th. I don't want us to drop down too far, but hopefully get like a king's ransom. Tommy, how do you feel about trading the 5th or the 7th?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, just like you said, it all depends how the board falls for us, right? Messing around with the mock drafts, simulators, you see them all over Twitter. It does kind of give you a good gauge of how some of these trades might happen, right? So say you get your guy at 5, say you get Iquanu, you get Neo, miraculously Hutchinson falls, whoever it is, you take your guy at 5. Then you have a QB hungry team that wants to move up, right? You have a Steelers team that wants to get a quarterback, right? And they say, hey, listen, we'll give you pick number 20, we'll give you a 2nd and a 3rd. I do agree with you. Financially, it's tough. The more rookies you bring on, the more money you have to allot. But I think trading down is the right way to go with the number 7 pick. I think number 5, you can kind of stay steady and take and have one of those players drop. Now, if you do have those 2 edge rushers and tackles off the board by 5, that's when things get interesting. Do you go best available player with Kyle Hamilton, right? Do you start to get into the reaching of Jermaine Johnson? Do you go with Devin Lloyd out of Utah? That's why I would trade down with that pick, because essentially those players you can get at 6, 7, 8, and 9. A lot of those players are going to be there at 12, 13, 14. So if you could trade down and you could pick up an extra 2nd rounder, now you could address the running back position later. In the 2nd round, you could start looking at, another edge rusher, right? You can never have enough edge rushers. When you go back to the Giants NASCAR defenses with Matthias Kiwanuka and Justin Tuck, O.C. Umenyiora, Mike Strahan, that's how we beat the Patriots, right? Yeah, Eli Manning was amazing. Eli Manning, in my opinion, is a Hall of Famer. But we beat those Patriot teams by rotating defensive linemen, by rotating defensive ends, keeping them fresh, and running that NASCAR. So I think if you trade down and you can pick up an extra 2nd or 3rd, and you believe in Joe Shane and his ability to find some studs in the middle rounds, I think you do it. I really do.
George, what do you think?
As for me, I think we're kind of getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. We haven't seen what Shane has been able to do with the money yet. And as far as trading down, I wouldn't mind trading down.
To connect to the Jabra 2510, go to the Bluetooth menu on your smartphone and select it from the
Hello?
list.
Is that me?
No, is that you, Tommy?
Yeah, we should. That might have been my speaker. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Anyway, I think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. As far as the cap goes, Steve, that was a fantastic job. What you were saying earlier with the cap money and what we need, but I really think that if there's a way to trim it, Shane's going to find a way to trim it. Shane's going to keep the players he wants to keep. More importantly, he's going to keep the players that, Dayball wants to keep. He's going to find a way to make it work. As far as trading away 5 or 7, 5, I want to go big time. I want to get somebody at 5. 7, if you give me a king's ransom, yeah, I'll definitely, trade you 7. And again, I'm just going to ask everybody. I've already heard how wrong I am about this, but when it comes to the combine and pro days, eventually a team will fall in love with a quarterback.
Sure.
You have 4, not necessarily A capacity round 1 deserving quarterbacks on this board, but you only have 4, and you have 12 to 13 teams that are going to be looking for a quarterback that they can tell their fans, look, this is our future. This is the guy that's going to get us through all those good things. And they will find a way or a reason to trade up. Will it be to 7? Maybe not. But we're still 3 months away, guys. So things start to build up from them. I could give you a list. I went and I looked at a list of not only early round QB, first round picks 1, 2 to 6, who ended up being busts in the NFL, but the media pushed them so hard that they ended up getting taken a lot earlier than they should have. Now, granted, just like Daniel Jones, they didn't ask to be drafted that early. They were drafted that early. That's why they call it the draft. You don't have a choice. The thing about it is I also found some later round QB picks that turned out to be great. So the thing about it is some of these QBs that are being looked at as later round picks, teams may be looking at them as, we need to go ahead and get this guy because we need to put somebody behind center who's going to, be better than what we had. So don't be surprised if you see a team move up for a QB. Will it be to 7? I can't make that call right now. I probably won't be able to make that call until draft night. But I guarantee you, these quarterbacks are going to be, teams are going to fall in love. It's going to happen. Teams are going to fall in love with them. And if they give us a king's ransom, yeah, take the trade. Yeah, I take the trade to move on down because, again, offensive line, defensive line, this is a deep draft.
All right. So you all raise good points, and I'm not going to dispute any of it. But for the sake of a fun debate here, I'm going to come at it from a different approach. I don't know if any of the quarterbacks in this draft are worthy of almost a top 10 pick. I don't feel it. But again, I'm not looking at what these evaluators and coaches are looking at. All right. So each team has their own set of needs. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, to the point about, do we have enough money, Steve, to your point about signing 5 and 7? And that's a deep question. And it's a great point that you raised. This is only my opinion. So, again, this is just spirited debate, guys. We were 4 and 13, all right, last season with this roster. We haven't had many winning seasons with a lot of this talent in a couple of years, okay? These guys, none of the people on this roster were brought in by these guys, by Schoen and Daboll, okay? I think there's going to be some very deep cuts. I think they're going to get very aggressive with the roster. I think we all agree on that. I just would not be surprised if they stay put at 5 and 7, whether one is an offensive lineman and then one is an edge, Hamilton, Tommy, to your point, whomever, I would not at all be surprised if given the holes and the amount of work that they need to do, they stay there. Again, next year is not going to be about wins. And I've said this numerous times. Next year, or this now, starting with this offseason, it's about salary, it's about rebuilding the foundation, and it's about building for the future. So again, I would not be surprised if they cut deep and they stay and they use those 2 picks. I don't know if any team is going to trade up that aggressively for a quarterback when we pick. I don't see the quarterback talent there. I don't. Just my opinion, guys.
Just watch them at the combine and watch them on their pro days and watch, if you think about it, let's take, okay, yeah, he plays for my team and everything, but take Sam Howell, for example. If you would have watched him in 2020, you would have said this kid's a first round pick.
Yeah, that was his better year.
2020, but here's the thing. Here's where things get lost by the media and by fans, is the fact that when he lost all his talent, his numbers went down. If you think about it, both of his running backs draft, 2 of his top wide receivers draft. One of them plays in Washington right now. When you lose your talent, your tight end is gone. When you lose your protection, your numbers are going to drop. But you're still the same quarterback that you were. You're just starting to realize that, hey, the looks that I had before, the scheme that I ran before is not the scheme I'm going to be able to run anymore because I have different talent around me. So the thing about it is if you look at his 2020 tape, you'd say, yeah, I'm definitely taking this guy top 5. I'll say top 15. Okay, I'm not going to say top 10. I'll say top 20 if that makes everybody happy. Top 20. You can't take his 21 tape because the kids that he came in from his freshman year with were gone after his junior year. But he decided to stay because he wanted to finish what they had started. He thought they could finish what they had started. But even with his drop numbers, he still had a good season. So we got to remember these things as we start talking about these players. And that's why I'm saying watch at the combine, watch at his pro days, what he does, because I think you're going to see a kid that can, number one, get the ball downfield. Number two, if you watch the Senior Bowl, you saw him run away from tackles like they weren't even there. He was gone. That's the Sam Howell that a pro team is going to get. And that's what scouts are really going to look at.
Fair point.
But that's my rant.
That was a good rant.
Tommy, since we're talking about a draft, a good friend of the show, Ed, had a question for you.
Yep.
Because you've done a lot of tape work on these players in the draft. And his question is, what player surprised you the most when you watched film on them? And which player disappointed you the most when you watched film on them?
Wow, it's a good one. So I'll start with what player really stood out and surprised me. It's not a lower round pick or a mid round pick, but it's their Jermaine Johnson, senior edge out of FSU. I didn't hear a lot about him as soon as the season ended. Started to see his name start popping up, in the 15 to 20 pick range. And when I watched this kid's tape, my goodness, unbelievable last 2 years, 12 sacks last season, long, lean, smart.
See the size of those arms? So long.
Oh my goodness. Like tackles could barely get their hands on this kid. Does he have some questionables? Of course. Every single one of these prospects has questionables. But when I look at Jermaine Johnson and I see that explosion, that tenacity, and then you think about Winks D and you think about, his obsession with the cover zero and creating pressure, creatively creating pressure, so to speak. If you're not going to get the edge at 5, maybe you reach for Johnson at 7, but if you look at this kid's tape, he just jumps off the screen. As far as one that I wasn't too impressed, and I'll admit I'm just kind of starting to get into the draft process right now. I'm working my way through the first round. I would have to say probably George Carrifolloptis. Watching his tape, I expected more. Big kid, strong kid, physical, traditional 4-3, hand in the dirt defensive end. Only had 4 sacks last year. Didn't really pop to me on tape. Definitely seems like a limited defensive end. You're not going to do a lot. You're not going to drop him back in coverage. He's not versatile. So when you think about picking a player in that, 5 to 10 range, that's just going to be, kind of a one-dimensional hand in the dirt end, he's probably going to be the guy you want to stay away from. And it's funny because I do see him mocked to us a lot, but I think that's someone we should stay away from. I think, not saying he can't be a good player or won't be a good player, but he's kind of like your traditional old school defensive end. I, one, don't think he's a good fit in Wink's defense. And two, I just don't see the real high ceiling there. I think he is who he is. Maybe he's a guy that gets you 3-4 sacks, but also he's not great against the run. Whenever the balls run towards him, he starts to get washed up a little bit. As soon as they break back down on him, he's not good coming backside. So that would be someone that when I watched the tape, I was really surprised that, he's being mocked in that 5 to 10 draft pick range. I really was.
I can give you a little bit on George Carrifolloptis because my good friend, his wife is a big Purdue fan. The thing about him was he's raw. And now that goes for both of them. Jermaine Johnson's raw too.
Yeah.
And that's why you didn't hear much about him like during the regular season. Was people were just starting to find out about him. And I think he was just starting to find himself, to be honest with you. But George, the thing about him is that I think it was 2019, he had an injury. So he had been working back from that injury. Prior to that, apparently he was a very, very dynamic player. But I do agree with you on this, and that is the fact that he's not going to fit the Martindale system. He is more of a run stopper, and Martindale is looking for some guys who are going to, speed rush and get out. If you're going to be on the end, you're going after that quarterback.
Steve, any thoughts?
Yeah. So, look, I normally, this is exactly the time when I really start digging deep into specific position. Last 30 years or so, my watching the draft, and without getting personal on the podcast, you guys know I've had some stuff going on, some good stuff, and family and work. So I've been delayed on that. But what it's allowed me to do is start over and take a step back and look high level, because I'm hearing a lot. I'm hearing George talk about specific players. I've heard a lot of the journalists and the media, Senior Bowl. So here's where I'm at, and maybe it's just a different way to think about the upcoming draft, guys, as you're going through the next month and a half, 2 months of all this off-season workout, combines, pro days. You need two things. So I was thinking about historically, you need two things to win. You need impact players. I mentioned that earlier. And number two, you need great foundational players, guys who work hard, maximize their talent, put the team over self. Think of any Super Bowl team, our Super Bowl teams, others. You had the high profile guys, and then you had the guys that, and it's interesting because if you look back at the playoffs just this past year, there's a lot of teams that were strong in one or the other, but they didn't have both, right?
Yeah.
Dallas comes to mind, not their Super Bowl winning teams because they had both, but just the last 5 years, a lot of glitz and glam, but not a lot of foundational players, guys who put team over self. Okay, not to pick on them. So I'm beginning to dig in. Combines first week of March, like we said, extra seniors this year due to the pandemic. I've got two takeaways as I think about this draft, because I have looked at the overviews of every single positional group. Now, I haven't dug into individual players, but I watched and listened to what happened in the Senior Bowl, the East-West Shrine. Number one, there's no sexy top great quarterbacks or offensive unicorns. Think of the tight end last year taken by Atlanta, right? There is no, oh my God. And I use the word unicorn because that's my word now. I'm sick and tired of it. I think we're also generational, right? Generational, what does that even mean?
Yeah,
right?
overused.
So am I wrong? I don't think so. And you guys tell me if I'm wrong when I'm done. I don't think there's any unicorns, offensive unicorns, and there's no sexy, great quarterbacks this year. I mean, we all know that. We've been talking about that. Everybody's talking about that. So what does that mean? What does that do to the draft? Well, the good news, otherwise this could be an all-time terrible draft, but the good news is with all these extra seniors, because of the pandemic, it's a very, very deep draft at certain positions. Yeah. What that does, though, is it pushes down a lot of potential starter types, meaning, and George has talked about this, you can get a starting tight end in the third, fourth, maybe fifth round. In years past, it's like, what? What are you talking about? There's no such, yes, because it's so deep.
Yeah.
In the third to fifth. So that's why I go back to my earlier comments. It's going to be so important to have a guy, finally a guy, hopefully, and his talent evaluation group that he's putting together, that along with Daboll and Wink, that will say, these are the types of players we want. And this is who we're going to go after. My understanding is, from what I've seen, is it's very deep draft for wide receivers, edge, tight ends, and offensive tackles. Linebackers and cornerbacks are just behind. They're not getting a lot of talk, but it's actually a very deep draft in corners. There's one or two at the top, right? We talked about Kyle Hamilton, safety. There's a few linebackers. Remember last week, George, Carl, we were talking about linebackers. And everybody got excited. Like, no, I got a man crush on. I had a man crush on the kid from Utah, and George like, but I got a man crush on this guy. I mean, wow, finally. Yeah. So, but there's only 3 centers really that are draftable. But here's what's interesting, and here's the point I'm trying to make. There's some phenomenal offensive guard prospects at the very, very tippy top. Yep. Kenyon Green and Zion Johnson, who are actually taking snaps at the Senior Bowl and in private workouts at center. Why do you think that is? So it's going to be about guys who can be versatile. It's going to be a deep draft. For me, this is, and I mentioned it earlier, think back to our 2007 team. So this is my final comment. And think about that poll that I talked about. 60, how many people was it? 60, excuse me, I'm just going to get it again. 62.5 said just improve. I just want to see we're going the right direction. We thought 2 years ago we were improving and going the right, and we learned our lesson with that. So this is going to be about reshaping this roster in the vision of what these coaches want. What does Daboll want? And the guys that he brought in, like Kafka, et cetera, what does Wink want? Tommy, you just talked about Wink. I got a man crush on Wink. To me, that was the number one DC that I wanted, brother. I'm with you. So what did we have in 2007? Aaron Ross was taken in the first, Steve Smith, Jay Alford, Zach Diossi, Kevin Boss. Oh my God, we all are like, from heaven, send us a Kevin Boss in the draft, that type of guy. He was picked in the 5th round that year. Adam Ketz, a serviceable backup tackle, Michael Johnson, corner, Ahmad Bradshaw in the 7th, had character concerns, had a funny way of running with his bow legs. Yeah, okay, we'll take him in the 7th. Yep. Thank you very much. So my final thoughts, I feel like this is the type of draft where he may make some moves. We just got to trust him. I think the next month and a half, 2 months is going to be so much fun to look at these players. I know you guys have already started to dig in. I need to catch up. I do. But it may not be the sexiest draft for, we didn't get the all-time great quarterbacks and whatever. But this week, I started looking at the wide receiver group. I was like, good Lord, there's some wide receivers here. I am not going to be angry if we take a top 10 wide receiver prospect in this wide receiver class, in let's say round 3 with one of those picks, or round 4. I mean, a guy who literally could be our 3rd wideout, because Slayton could be gone. He could be traded. We got our number 1. We got Tony. And what do we got? Shep's gone. So what do we have behind that, guys? That's how you build a roster. Mm-hmm. Draft cheap, young talent, and then hopefully, God willing, sign him to second contracts, right? So I think this is going to be a huge draft for us. He's got to get under the cap, just put some money aside, and just get lots of good picks and sign them. That's what I'm excited about. We need edge. We need offensive line. But Tommy, George, you guys have hit on it. I think if we get a linebacker, if we get a tight end, I think there's very few, there is no positional group except literally a kicker. I think we got our kicker.
Yeah. It seems to me that this is the kind of draft where there's a lot of hidden gems that are going to be available later.
No doubt.
You've just got to find them, and you got to the point that everybody's making, this is going to be the draft about maneuverability, making your moves, but yet you've identified those guys that you can get later on and still add picks for, if that's the way they go. So this is going to be a fascinating draft. And you've all raised some really good points. And just FYI, because I'm a big offensive lineman guy for this draft, if we do trade back, I'm starting to see more and more likely that the Tyler Linderbaum is going to be there later in the draft. Just
Oh yeah.
FYI.
Oh yeah.
I love
Yeah.
the
Let's
guy.
go.
I've been looking
Yeah.
at him.
Definitely.
So, I mean,
Oh yeah.
if they want to trade back on that 7, a couple picks, I'm all for it. No problem.
Good point.
Tommy, do you have one more question we can kind of hit quickly before we got to wrap this up?
Yes, I guess the final thing would be, and I know we keep moving ahead pretty quick, but it's so hard not to talk about some of these things. When you look at free agency, right, and you look at Joe Shane, wants to clear up about $40 million. You're looking at probably, $8 to $9 million for rookies. But you're also looking at, we have a roster that's currently constructed for the previous regime, right? The previous coaching staff, the previous offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. If you do have 30 million, let's say, to spend, and you can get maybe 2 mid-level free agents, maybe you try to grab one big fish. I wouldn't do that in our position. We need a lot. But if you do, you can grab a couple of players. I think it's interesting to see. And also, personnel wise, what kind of personnel are we going to run? Is the ball going to kind of put, inflect the 11 personnel, 10 personnel onto Kafka? Is that how it's going to be? Is he going to let Kafka do his thing? So it's interesting. You got a few players out there. You got, Mike Gesicki. That's somebody I've been looking at. We're possibly losing both tight ends. This kid's a 6'6", 250-pound monster in Miami. Can go up and get the ball. Former volleyball, basketball player, 800 yards last season. Only 2 other tight ends had as many receptions as him. So that's something we have to look at. Just wanted to get your point of view. Where do you think we kind of go in that direction with free agency when it comes?
Guys, which one of you wants to start with that one?
Steve, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big focus in free agency we've talked about is depth, and we can't. There was a comment made in one of our prior podcasts. You can't start 4 rookies. I mean, you could do whatever you want,
Right.
but what are the odds we're going to start 4 rookies, right? So we could hope that Shane Lemieux or Nick Gates gets healthy. I think it might be more likely Shane Lemieux. I mean, God bless Nick Gates. He's looking good so far. Same type of injury Soybert had years ago. I mean, you can't count on that, right, George? I think
No joke.
use those exact words. So we have to sign an offensive lineman. And I talked last week about the offensive guard that I would love, or 2 weeks ago, I mentioned offensive guard. So the free agent from the Colts. So so listen, Tommy, I think adding to the tight end room is important. The nice thing about tight ends is you can pick up the backup or the backup to the backup from another team. And we've shown even on our team, but many teams sign tight ends away from other teams. Maybe they've been on a roster for 3 years and they're just not getting the shot. You sign them away, you hit pay dirt with them. So I think we can get those types of players as a tight end to add to the tight end room. Offensive line, we have to. Look, I think there's positions on the field. Defensive tackle doesn't always cost a ton of money. We've signed some backup DTs. I think you can add depth to the team and rotational players, starters even. Listen, there's not a team in the league that has all players on both sides of the ball who make the Pro Bowl, right? You're going to have average players too. Every team does. So, I'd focus in the trenches. I think that's what we need help.
I'm with you there, Steve. And I agree with you. I like Lewinsky also. And who else I've also had my eyes on is there free agent now is Daniels, James Daniels out of Chicago. Good situational player. He comes on the cheap, but I think he would be able to jump in here. Another veteran presence to start. Just someone I've got. His AAV for last year was 1.7, where Glowinski was 5.4. On the defensive side, you mentioned defensive tackle. Calais Campbell is still out there, and he's played under Wink, I believe. He says he wants to still play, as much as people have said he might be retiring. Maybe there's a deal to be made there too. those are just the three players that I've got my eyes on. George, you looking at anybody?
I am not. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, talk to me after June 1st. Talk to me after we get this salary. Because it's like I said earlier, I think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. I think if you were to ask me right now what we're looking at, I think we are. We're going to go depth. I think we're going to go, offensive guards. I think we're going to go defensive tackle. I don't think we're going anywhere more outside of that because I just don't think we have the financial to work it. I think that we are just stuck in a predicament. And, we'll have to see what happens with the cuts. We'll have to see what happens with the tags and things like that, because I don't know our financial situation right now. I'm not looking at the books. These guys are looking at the books. And I would love those names that you guys mentioned. I would love to have, but are they the kind of guys that are going to come on the cheap? We don't know, and if we're looking at depth, do we want starters from other teams? Are they going to want to be backups for the Giants, or do they want to be out there on the field 90% of the time? I just don't think we have the money to be getting those kinds of guys. But again, like I said, ask me after March, ask me after June 1st. I'll have names for you. But just right now, we're just in such a predicament. All I can see is every time you write down a name, all I say is can't afford them, because we truly can't.
Yep.
And that's the reality of it. Now, as far as, I can talk on the draft and pro days and things like that, because, I know by the time the draft comes, Shane is going to have it down to where at least we can get our draft picks. I'm not worried about getting 5 and 7, because I think 5 and 7 we will be able to afford by the time Shane is done with the books. I don't know where we're going to be as far as free agency though.
Tommy, since you asked the question, are there any free agents that you have your eyes on?
Yeah, so like I said, I mentioned Jasaki earlier. I think, when you really look at it, and like we've all said, so much depends on the draft. So much depends on how much money we could put together. Are we cutting players like Booker, James Bradbury? Are we able to make a trade there? What can we get back for that? I like, not to go back to the Dolphins again, but Emmanuel Agba, defensive end. If we don't grab our edge rusher in the first round, I had 9 sacks last year. Tremendously productive. He's a 7 technique defensive end, so his hand's going to be in the dirt. Another player that would be great for Wink. But price, it's all price. You also have Brandon Sheriff from the Redskins. That's probably pie in the sky for us at this point because we don't have the money to deal. But positionally, if I had to look at positionally, obviously those are my kind of like sexy players. I would love for Sean to get creative. And, some people say the salary cap is a myth. I don't believe that personally. Dollars are dollars, and what you have is what you have, and what you don't is what you don't. But I would look at positionally based on after the draft, obviously. We need depth on the O-line. We need depth on the defensive line, in my opinion. If we don't get our edge rushers, then we go after edge, but I would look at probably, those 2 from Miami. I like Sheriff. I haven't dug deep into some of the, bargain basement guys. Maybe we can get on that topic on another show. But I think whatever position we don't flip in the draft, and that's what we should go after. Obviously, edge, O-line, number 1 and number 2.
Can I ask you something real quick, Tommy? What do you think Sheriff would cost us if you were to just ballpark it? Bam. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say probably. So you're looking at a higher end starting guard in the NFL. I'd say you're probably looking at anywhere, 16 million a year, 15 million a year, somewhere in that range.
I was going to say 15.
Man, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
We don't
A lot
have
of money.
AAV last year was 18 million.
Yeah.
So
A lot of money.
Yeah. I think he's going to be too expensive for us.
Was he tagged last year? Does anybody know?
What's that?
Was he coming off his rookie contract, or was he tagged last year?
That I don't know.
Okay.
I know. I don't
believe
think
he was tagged.
It was
You believe he was tagged? Okay.
30
Yeah, I
years
believe
old.
so.
Yeah, I don't think he was on his rookie deal.
So can I give you guys just one quick, and I know sometimes it's not quick when I say it's quick, but this is quick. What we don't know is what this staff thinks about our very young player. And I'll throw out just 2 guys. Brightwell, the running back. A lot of us are like, wasted pick. But they may have seen enough to say, we scouted him. He's good at catching the ball out of the backfield. This is a guy that we don't, to us, he's not just, but better. Ellison Smith, 4th round, which is, a high pick to use. I mean, that's where teams are built, those middle rounds. The kid's a monster physically, but he's young.
I like him.
He came on late in college, right? He had the famous defensive end from the NFL, I always forget his name, from the Packers, I think, who kind of developed him in college. We don't know. Like, you get a guy like Wink in there, you get these offensive minds. So what we don't know is, will some of these young, unproven players become ascending players? We don't know. And to me, that's something to be excited about. This coaching staff.
And to your point, right now, all we're doing is speculating, because we don't know. We don't know what they're seeing, what they like. I'm sure they're still going through the roster and making their opinions and their assessments. So it's all speculation, just like everybody else is doing, but it's fun speculation. I mean, it just feels better this year. It feels different.
Yeah, it does.
There's
It's
more
exciting.
and excitement and buzz this year. So very quickly, Tommy, thank you so much for joining us tonight. You were a great guest. You love what you added here. Great knowledge. I think I speak for everybody when I say we'd love to have you back on some shows later on.
Absolutely.
And also just remember that we're now, you can also find our podcast now on iHeartRadio, Apple iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts. If you can't watch us, please listen to us. And if you're giving us ratings, please continue with the 5-star ratings so we can continue to bring you good shows, good quality shows. Guys, unless anybody has anything else, I'd say we had a good show tonight. And Tommy, again, thank you so much, brother. We really appreciate it.
Thank you,
For
Tommy.
having me on. Thank you for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. My first time doing anything like this, so I really appreciate you guys having me here.
Tommy, you were prepared. You were passionate.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, man.
Great show, guys. Have a good night, everybody.
All right,
All
now,
right,
brother.
guys.